When purpose is clear, hesitation fades. Decisions become faster, cleaner, and more aligned. There is no constant second guessing, no endless need for approval, because when your why is strong enough, you stop asking for permission to exist as you are. You stop negotiating your values just to fit into spaces that were never designed for you. And that clarity, it doesn't just guide you, it challenges everyone around you. People are comfortable around uncertainty because it allows them to hide. But certainty? Certainty exposes. When you stand firmly in your purpose, you become a reflection others cannot ignore. They begin to see where they lack direction, where they have been settling, where they have been playing small, and not everyone is ready for that confrontation. So instead of rising, they retreat. Instead of understanding, they judge. Not because you are wrong, but because your clarity highlights their confusion. Living with purpose is not about having everything figured out. It is about having something that grounds you when everything else feels unstable. It's the quiet voice that says, keep going when results are slow. It's the internal compass that keeps you aligned when external noise gets loud. And the more you trust that voice, the stronger it becomes. There is also a discipline that comes with knowing your why. It demands consistency, requires you to show up even when motivation fades. Because purpose is not a mood, it's a commitment. And that level of commitment separates those who dream from those who actually build something meaningful. When a woman operates from purpose, her actions are no longer random. They are intentional steps towards something bigger than temporary comfort. This is why not everyone will understand you, because most people are still searching for a reason while you are already living yours. They are still waiting for the right time while you are creating it. And that difference creates distance. But that distance is not a loss, it's alignment. It's life removing what no longer matches who you are becoming. The truth is, when you lead with your why, you stop trying to prove your worth. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't need constant validation. Your presence speaks through your consistency, your focus, and your refusal to settle. And over time, that quiet confidence becomes louder than any words you could say, because in the end, power isn't about control, it's about clarity. And when a woman is clear on her purpose, she becomes unstoppable. Not because she forces her way forward, but because nothing can distract her from where she is going. There is something deeply unsettling about someone who has nothing to hide. Not because they are perfect, but because they are real. They speak with clarity, they act with intention, and they don't shapeshift depending on who is watching. And that level of consistency forces others to confront an uncomfortable question. Why can't I do the same? Authenticity is not about being liked. It's about being aligned. It means your words match your actions, your values guide your decisions, and your identity remains steady even when circumstances change. That kind of alignment creates a presence that feels strong, even in silence. And people notice it. Some are drawn to it because it inspires them to step into their own truth. Others feel exposed by it because it reflects the gaps between who they are and who they pretend to be. When you stop performing, you stop seeking approval, and that alone changes everything. You no longer adjust your tone to avoid conflict. You no longer shrink your ideas to keep others comfortable. You no longer apologize for having standards. And while that freedom feels natural to you, it can feel threatening to those who are still navigating life through validation. The truth is, many people are more comfortable with a version of you that is easier to understand, easier to control, easier to predict. Authenticity removes that predictability. It makes you less accessible to manipulation, less influenced by external pressure, and less willing to tolerate what doesn't align. And when people can no longer place you into a box, they often react with confusion or resistance. But authenticity is not about rebellion. It's not about proving a point or standing out for attention. It's about honesty. Honesty in how you think, how you feel, and how you show up. It's about choosing truth over convenience, even when it creates distance. Because the connections built on authenticity are fewer, but they are deeper, stronger, and more meaningful. There is also a quiet confidence that comes with being real. You don't have to remember who you pretended to be yesterday. You don't have to manage multiple versions of yourself. There is simplicity in truth. And that simplicity creates clarity. It allows you to move through life with less friction, less doubt, and more direction. And yes, authenticity will cost you. It will cost you approval from people who only valued the version of you that fit their expectations. It will cost you comfort in spaces that required you to shrink. But what it gives in return is far greater. It gives you freedom. Freedom to exist without constant self-correction, freedom to grow without limitation, freedom to build a life that actually reflects who you are, because in the end, authenticity doesn't isolate you, it filters your world, it removes what is not real so that what remains is aligned, genuine, and worth keeping. And while that process may feel uncomfortable at first, It is the foundation of a life that doesn't require you to pretend. Boundaries are not walls meant to shut people out. They are standards that define what is acceptable and what is not. They communicate self-respect without needing constant explanation. And when those standards are firm, they challenge the behavior of others. People who benefit from your silence begin to feel uncomfortable. People who relied on your flexibility begin to feel restricted. Not because you changed unfairly, but because you stopped allowing what was never right to begin with. There is a misconception that strong boundaries are harsh or selfish. In reality, they are disciplined. They require awareness, consistency, and the courage to follow through. Because setting a boundary is one thing, but maintaining it is another. It means you don't just speak your limits, you live them. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it disappoints someone, even when it creates distance. And that is where the real shift happens. When you stop negotiating your standards to keep others comfortable, you begin to see people more clearly. Some will respect your boundaries without question. They will adjust, understand, and meet you with the same level of respect you offer them. Others will resist. They will push, test, and sometimes even try to guilt you into going back to who you used to be. But their reaction is not about your boundary, it's about what they lose because of it. Strong boundaries also remove confusion. They eliminate mixed signals and unspoken expectations. People know where they stand with you. There is no guessing, no hidden agendas, no silent resentment building over time. And while that level of clarity creates healthier interactions, it also removes the comfort of ambiguity that many people rely on. Because when everything is clear, there is no place to hide. There is power in being able to walk away without needing to justify your decision. Not out of anger, but out of alignment. You recognize when something no longer fits your values, your energy, or your direction, and instead of forcing it to work, you choose yourself. That choice may not always be understood, but it is always respected, especially by those who have learned the same lesson. What strong boundaries truly reveal is not just the behavior of others, but the strength of your own self-worth. They show how much you are willing to tolerate, how much you are willing to protect your peace, and how committed you are to living in alignment with who you are becoming. And the more consistent you are with your boundaries, the less you will need to explain them, because over time, people don't just hear your standards, they feel them in your decisions, in your presence, in the way you carry yourself. And that feeling becomes a filter. It naturally attracts those who respect you and distances those who don't. Not through force, but through clarity. Noise is often mistaken for confidence. The loudest voice in the room is assumed to be the strongest, the most certain, the most in control. But true confidence doesn't demand attention. It commands respect. It doesn't rush to fill every gap in conversation or defend every opinion. Instead, it observes, listens, and responds only when it matters. And that difference shifts how people perceive you. When you are comfortable with silence, you are no longer controlled by the need to react. You don't interrupt your own peace just to match someone else's energy. You don't engage in every disagreement just to prove a point. And you don't explain yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. That level of control is rare, and because it is rare, it feels intimidating to those who are used to constant reassurance and explanation. Silence also creates space to think, to process, to understand what is really happening beneath the surface. While others are busy reacting emotionally, you are observing patterns, reading energy, and making decisions with clarity. And that ability to pause instead of react allows you to move with intention rather than impulse. It turns your responses into choices instead of habits. There is also a certain mystery in silence. When you don't reveal everything at once, people pay more attention. They listen more closely. They become aware of your presence in a different way. Not because you are trying to be distant, but because you are not giving away your energy freely. And in a world where oversharing is common, that sense of control becomes powerful. Silence is not avoidance. It is not about suppressing your voice or ignoring what matters. It is about choosing the right moment, the right words, and the right audience. It is about understanding that your energy is valuable and not every situation deserves access to it. And when you operate from that mindset, your words carry more weight. Because when you finally speak, it is intentional, direct, and meaningful. There is strength in not needing to have the last word. There is strength in walking away from conversations that lead nowhere. There is strength in allowing others to reveal themselves while you remain steady and composed. And that strength does not come from indifference. It comes from self-awareness. You know who you are, and because of that, you don't feel the need to constantly prove it. Over time, people begin to recognize this pattern. They notice that you are not easily pulled into drama, not easily influenced by pressure, not easily shaken by noise. And that consistency builds a reputation that words alone cannot create. A reputation of calm, of control, of quiet confidence that speaks even when you don't. Because in the end, silence is not empty. It is full of awareness, intention, and strength. And when used with clarity, it becomes more powerful than any words spoken without purpose. Growth is not just about gaining new skills or achieving external success. It is about internal change, how you think, what you value, what you tolerate, and what you expect from yourself and others. And when those internal standards rise, they naturally create distance from anything that no longer aligns, not out of arrogance, not out of rejection, but out of clarity. You begin to recognize that staying the same would require you to ignore everything you have learned. This is where many people feel conflicted. Because growth often requires letting go, and letting go is uncomfortable. It can feel like loss, even when it is necessary. Relationships may shift. Some people will understand your evolution and support it, even if it means seeing less of you. Others will resist it, questioning why you have changed, why you are no longer as available, why you no longer accept what you once did. But the truth is, you didn't change randomly. You changed intentionally. You grew into someone who can no longer operate at the same level as before. Distance does not always mean disconnection. Sometimes it simply means different directions. People can still respect each other and care for each other, but no longer share the same mindset, priorities, or pace of growth. And forcing alignment where it no longer exists only creates frustration. Because growth requires honesty. The honesty to admit when something no longer fits, even if it once meant everything. There is also a discipline in continuing to grow despite the distance it creates. It would be easier to stay where you are understood, where expectations are familiar, where you don't have to explain your evolution. But comfort does not lead to expansion. Growth demands that you move forward, even when it means stepping into spaces where you are not yet fully known or fully comfortable. And that willingness to move anyway is what separates temporary change from lasting transformation. As you evolve, your circle may become smaller, but it becomes stronger. The connections that remain are built on alignment, not convenience. They are based on shared values, mutual respect, and a similar commitment to growth. And while there may be fewer people, the depth of those relationships replaces the need for quantity. There will be moments when the distance feels heavy, when you question whether the path you are on is worth the separation it creates. But in those moments, it is important to remember that growth is not meant to isolate you. It is meant to align you. It removes what no longer matches your direction so that what remains supports where you are going, because in the end, distance is not the cost of growth. It is the evidence of it. It shows that you are no longer standing still, no longer settling, no longer staying in places that cannot hold the person you are becoming. When a woman is aligned within herself, her energy reflects clarity. She doesn't need to convince anyone of who she is because her presence already communicates it. There is a steadiness in how she moves, a calmness in how she responds, and a certainty in how she carries herself. And that consistency builds trust, not just with others, but within herself. Because when your internal state matches your external behavior, there is no conflict, no confusion, no need to perform. On the other hand, when there is misalignment, it is just as visible. Words may sound confident, but the energy feels uncertain. Actions may appear kind, but the intention feels off. And people pick up on that, even if they can't fully explain it. This is why energy becomes a filter. It reveals what is real and what is forced, what is genuine and what is calculated. And for someone who has developed awareness, this filter becomes impossible to ignore. Energy also shapes the kind of experiences you attract. Not in a mystical sense, but in a practical one. The way you think influences the way you act. The way you act influences how others respond to you. And over time, those responses create patterns. When your energy is grounded in self-respect, clarity, and purpose, you naturally attract situations and people that reflect those qualities. And when it is rooted in doubt or inconsistency, you often find yourself in cycles that reinforce that same uncertainty. There is responsibility in understanding that your energy is always communicating. It speaks when you are silent. It speaks when you are present. It even speaks when you are trying not to engage. And because of that, it requires awareness. Awareness of what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you project. Because every reaction, every decision, every interaction adds to the signal you are sending into the world. This is why protecting your energy becomes essential. Not by isolating yourself, but by being intentional about where you invest your time and attention. Not every environment deserves your presence. Not every conversation deserves your engagement. And not every person deserves access to your space. When you understand this, you stop spreading your energy thin, trying to meet every expectation. Instead, you focus it where it aligns with your values and your direction. People who are not aligned with themselves often feel uncomfortable around someone who is. Not because of anything you say or do directly, but because your presence highlights the gap they are trying to ignore. And that discomfort can show up in different ways: distance, criticism, misunderstanding. But again, it is not about you. It is about what your energy reveals, because in the end, energy is truth without explanation. It does not argue, it does not justify, and it does not pretend. It simply reflects who you are. And when that reflection is clear, consistent, and aligned, it becomes one of the most powerful forms of communication you will ever have.